Okay, this is our spring review. Hopefully you have the sheet in front of you and you are ready to fill out the packet. A lot of this should look familiar for you. In fact, all of it should, but feel free to pause, to rewind, or to email me with any questions. We're going to start with quarter one. We have our feudal power pyramid. This is on your sheet. And what we're looking at here is the social, political, and economic structure for the feudal system. They all look very much the same. We have the king at the top. His power is based on land, and he's going to enter into a feudal promise with other members of his society, primarily the nobles. And this feudal promise is going to be in exchange of land, which the king owns, for loyalty. He'll give the noble a section of his kingdom in exchange for food, supplies, fighting forces if necessary. That whole thing is encompassed in loyalty. The nobles and the knights will also enter into a similar feudal promise. The nobles will give the knights food, supplies, armor, and horses, both of which were very expensive, in exchange for military might. The serfs are at the bottom. They are 90% of our feudal society, and they are going to do the back-breaking labor, especially the farming. This was a farming society, in exchange for protection. Not that they had a lot of choice, but they did get that protection benefit out of it. Now the clergy, we've put them here on our power pyramid. They go up there because they are going to be in all sections of society, but because they speak for God, because they're in the Catholic Church, the only church in feudal Europe, they are going to have a lot of power from that. They're going to say to the nobles, this is what God wants you to do. They are going to say to the knights, this is what God wants you to do. And they are going to say to the serfs, this is what God wants you to do. Only one member of the clergy will have the power to say that to the king, and that is the Pope. We remember from our debate who has more power, the king or the Pope, and really that ability to speak for God is going to count for a lot. Economically speaking, the serfs doing all of our back-breaking labor are going to divide their work into a three-field system. 1/3 for the nobles, 1/3 for the clergy, and 1/3 for themselves. Really, it's whatever's left, because if they have a bad season, they still owe that total expected 1/3 to the nobles and to the clergy, so they really get whatever is left over. No control over their lives, the serfs. And that is going to change as we come into the Renaissance because of the Crusades, because of the Black Plague. We talked about it a little bit during first quarter. We're going to talk about it a lot more this coming week. Into second quarter, we have Mali as an example of African kingdoms. This is all going to be based on trade. Merchants are going to be allowed to come in and out of the city with being taxed by the government, but generally free to move around. And they are going to trade the two major natural resources of the Mali Empire, gold and salt. While they are doing this, they are also trading Islam. Remember, we have our seen and unseen characteristics of culture being traded. This is going to be a system that the Europeans are going to use when they come in. They are going to say, there's a trade system already in place. This is how originally we're going to get gold. Gold being one of the 5 reasons that the Europeans came into Africa. Remember, gold is a huge motivating factor for the Europeans as we look at Latin America as well. You've got gold and other natural resources. You've got the spreading of Christianity in a similar way to the merchants under Mansa Musa spreading Islam. You've got the desire for land, for territory as a sign of power, and then of course the power itself of having colonies. And finally, the slave trade. It is important for you to remember that slavery is not a new concept introduced by white Europeans to black Africans. It was in place between African tribes, selling of prisoners of war as slaves already in place. Finally, quarter 3, we're looking at the Latin American empires. The Inca are going to be very similar to our feudal system. There's no money, jobs are assigned by the government, and those jobs help pay taxes. So it could be a 3-field system where 1/3 is going to the government, 1/3 to the priests, and then 1/3 for the farmers themselves. It could be working on the road systems. It could be serving in the military, but that's how they get their taxes paid. However, unlike the feudal system, if you were sick, if you were widowed, if you have another child, the government is going to provide for you, either by giving you more land to feed more children or by feeding you out of government storehouses. So this is still equally controlling, but there are certainly more benefits to the Incan system for those at the bottom of our economic pyramid. The Aztec are going to be more similar to the Mali Empire in fact that they have a merchant-driven society. They don't have a lot of land. Chinampas can only spread so far, so they're going to collect high taxes from their lower classes, especially from the conquered people that they are conquering specifically for resources. Oh, we're running out of land for food. Let's conquer this area. We'll sacrifice their warriors to our gods, and we will take as much food, clothing, whatever resources we need from them. This is called a tribute to the new Aztec Empire. So this is really all that you need to know. Not all you need to know, but most of what you need to know from the past year. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. This sheet is due on Tuesday for even days and Wednesday for odd days. Have a great rest of your spring break, and I will see you next week.